Miss Tanya Latrice Sanders, age 48, of 215 Ross Street, Montezuma, Georgia, died Wednesday, May 5th, at the Pine Point Hospice in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Tanya Latrice Sanders, age 48, was held Saturday, May 15, on the grounds of the Bethlehem Baptist Church in Doolin, Georgia. Elder Roy Edge officiated. The eulogy was delivered by her beloved brother and pastor, the Reverend Jerry Sanders, pastor of the Bethlehem Baptist Church of Doolin, Georgia. The burial followed at the Spring Hill Church Cemetery in Marshallville, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Miss Latidra Sanders of McDonald, Georgia, Miss Kenedra Sanders, and Miss Michaela Sanders, both of Montezuma, Georgia. 3 loving grandchildren, her beloved father, Mr. Thomas Sanders, her loving sisters, Miss Lisa C. Tuff, Miss Angela Mathis and her husband, Mr. Willie Mathis, Miss Latrina Sanders Hubbard and her husband, Mr. Timothy Hubbard, and Miss Marcia Sanders Perry, all of Montezuma, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Ronnie E. Smith of Montezuma, Georgia, the Reverend Jerry Sanders and his wife, Mrs. Brittany Sanders of Americus, Georgia, Mr. Antoine Sanders, Mr. Thomas Oliver and his wife, Mrs. Dorothy Oliver, and Mr. Eric Chastain, all of Montezuma, Georgia. Her beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Patricia Smith of Montezuma, Georgia, Mrs. Kimberly Thomas and her husband, Mr. Ted Thomas of Albany, Georgia, Mrs. Viola Mann and her husband, Mr. John Henry Mann of West Palm Beach, Florida, Mrs. Louise Smith, Mr. Donaldson Smith and his wife, Mrs. Catherine Smith, Mr. Robert Smith and his wife, Mrs. Felicia Smith, and Mrs. Ozzie Lohman, all of Montezuma, Georgia. A host of nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive Miss Tanya Latrice Sanders, age 48, of 215 Ross Street, Montezuma, Georgia. Mrs. Geneva Green Lusain, age 73, of 154 Olson Drive, Leslie, Georgia, died Friday, May 7th, at the home of her beloved daughter, Mrs. Amy Lusain, in Auburn, Alabama. The funeral service for Miss Geneva Green Lusain, age 73, was held Saturday, May 15, graveside at Staley Memorial Gardens in Americus, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Glenn Bryant Sr., pastor of the New Lebanon Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Eddie Lusain Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Marilyn Lusain of Albany, Georgia, Miss Amy Lusain of Auburn, Alabama, her beloved grandchildren, Miss Jasmine Lusain, Mr. Christian Wiley, Mr. Jalen Lusain, Mrs. Tiffany Bivens, and her husband, Mr. Ashley Bivens, and Mr. Brandon Chambers, one great-granddaughter, a beloved daughter-in-law, Miss Lily Maddox of Auburn, Alabama, her beloved sisters, Mrs. Archie Harris and her husband, Mr. Charles Harris, and Miss Diana Furlow, both of Leslie, Georgia, Mrs. Bertha Smith and her husband, Mr. Marion Smith, Mrs. Levon Sims and her husband, Mr. Tim Sims, and Miss Bobby Green, all of Americus, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Edward Green and his wife, Mrs. Jenny Green of Leslie, Georgia, Mr. Roosevelt Green and his wife, Miss Amy Green of Denver, Colorado, and Mr. Charlie Green and his wife, Mrs. Wavette Green of Albany, Georgia. Her beloved aunt, Miss Inez Green of Americus, Georgia, and Mrs. Jimmy Green of Miami, Florida. Her beloved sisters-in-law, Mrs. Laura Green, Mrs. May Ellen Lusain Mays, Mrs. Rita Green, and Mrs. Betty Ross Green. A host of nieces and nephews, to include her devoted nieces, Miss Angela Green of Denver, Colorado, Mrs. Angela Roberts and her husband, Mr. Andre Roberts of Albany, Georgia. Her extended family, Miss Christine Wade of Americus, Georgia, Deacon Walter and Mrs. Mary Milner of Montgomery, Alabama, Mr. Otis and Mrs. Berta White of Leslie, Georgia, Mrs. Aria Davis of North Point, North Carolina, and Mrs. Ceola Fudge. Her grandson, Mr. Jonathan Bowden, and his wife, Mrs. Ashley Bowden of Atlanta, Georgia, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Geneva Green Lusain, age 73, of 154 Olson Drive, Leslie, Georgia. Mr. Hiram Ford, age 50, of Cordele, Georgia, died Friday, May 7th at Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Hiram Ford, age 50, was held Saturday, May 15th, graveside at the Sunnyside Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Brother James Wise of the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses officiated. Survivors include his loving and caring children, Mr. Hiram Ford Jr., Miss Hillary Nicole Ford, Miss Alexandra Ford, all of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved sisters, Mrs. Annie Brown and Mrs. Janice Bush, both of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Luana Holmes of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Mrs. Maddie Pope and her husband, Arthur Pope of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Geraldine Brown and Mrs. Judy Williams, both of Tampa, Florida. A beloved brother, Mr. Alvin Ford of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved aunts, Mrs. Annabelle Heath of Brooklyn, New York. Mrs. Clara Brooks of Perry, Georgia. Mrs. Anna Williams and Mrs. Sue Ellen Williams of Tampa, Florida. A host of nieces, nephews, to include two special nieces, Miss Tiffany McCrae of Tifton, Georgia, and Miss Tiffany McCrae of Cordele, Georgia. Many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Hiram Ford, age 50, of Cordele, Georgia. Again, the family of Mother Jessie Alma Ezel of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Bertha LaShawn Tyner Holt of Americus, Georgia. The family of Miss Tanya Latrice Sanders of Montezuma, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Geneva Green Lusain of Leslie, Georgia. The family of Mr. Hiram Ford of Cordele, Georgia would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mrs. Carrie Amelia Jackson Brown, age 72, of 1007 Thomas Mill Road, Plains, Georgia, died Saturday, May 8th at her residence in Plains, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Bernita Sampson and her husband, Mr. Paul Sampson, and Miss Wendy Adams, and her friend, Mr. Ricky Harvey of Plains, Georgia. A devoted son, Mr. Derek Brown, and his wife, Mrs. Kimberly Brown of Libram, Georgia. Her son-in-law, Mr. John Adams of Plains, Georgia. 9 beloved grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, 2 great-great-grandchildren, 5 beloved sisters, Mrs. Martha Foster and her husband, Mr. Paul Foster of Swanee, Georgia, Mrs. Annie B. Wilson and her husband, Mr. Marvin Wilson of Americus, Georgia, Mrs. Betty J. Burton and her husband, Mr. Matthew Burton, and Mrs. Brenda Battle and her husband, Mr. Joe Battle of Plains, Georgia, Mrs. Jenny Cook of Bel Air, Maryland, 2 beloved brothers, Mr. Clyde Jackson Jr. of Plains, Georgia, and Mr. Jeffrey Tullis and his wife, Mrs. Daphne Tullis of Acworth, Georgia. 1 sister-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy Crenshaw Jackson, her devoted cousin, Mr. Lawrence Marshall, and Miss Mary J. Jackson of Plains, Georgia. A host of special nieces and nephews, cousins, friends to include Mrs. Bernice Ingram of Americus, Georgia, Mrs. Katie Bell Jackson of Plains, Georgia, Mrs. Willie Mae Goodman of Willisburg, New Jersey, and Mrs. Shirlene Wright of Preston, Georgia. A host of other relatives survived. Mrs. Carrie Amelia Jackson Brown, age 72, of 1007 Thomas Mill Road, Plains, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Carrie Amelia Jackson Brown, age 72, will be held today, Sunday, May 16th, at 1 p.m., graveside at the Lebanon Cemetery in Plains, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Glenn Bryant Sr., pastor of the New Lebanon Baptist Church, will officiate. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Willie James Brown, age 74, of 401 East 16th Street, Tifton, Georgia, died Saturday, May 8th at the 10th Regional Medical Center in Tifton, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Annie Ford Brown of Tifton, Georgia. His beloved children, Mrs. Ella Williams and Mr. Rodell Ford, both of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. William Ford of Americus, Georgia, and Miss Avita Ford of Tifton, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. Philip Brown of Cordele, Georgia. A beloved sister, Miss Joyce McKenzie of Baltimore, Maryland. A host of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survived. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Willie James Brown, age 74, of 401 East 16th Street, Tifton, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors For United States Navy veteran Mr. Willie James Brown, age 74, will be held today, Sunday, May 16, at 5 p.m. graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. Mr. Dennis Armstrong, age 65, 118 Plantation Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, May 10th at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Deborah Applin Armstrong of Cordele, Georgia. His loving and devoted children, Mr. Carlos Armstrong and his wife, Mrs. Mercy Armstrong, Mrs. Lenitra Brown and her husband, Mr. Allen Brown, Mrs. Tequila Armstrong, Miss Tamara Armstrong and her husband, Mr. Curtis Armstrong, Miss Shantae Armstrong and her husband, Mr. Tommy Armstrong, all of Cordele, Georgia. A beloved son-in-law, Mr. Clifford Brown Sr., 25 beloved grandchildren, 25 great-grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Esther Johnson and her husband, Mr. Bobby Johnson, Miss Beulah Armstrong, Miss Pernell Armstrong, Miss Jackie Armstrong, and Miss Kathy Edwards, all of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved and devoted brothers, Mr. Charles Daniels and his wife, Mrs. Vivian Daniels of Cordele, Georgia, and Mr. Kenneth Armstrong and his wife, Mrs. Gloria Armstrong of Sarasota, Florida. A beloved uncle, Mr. Curtis Armstrong of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His beloved in-law, Mr. Larry Applin, Mr. Michael Applin and his wife, Mrs. Tara Applin, Mrs. Jessie Walker and her husband, Mr. Willie Frank Walker, Mrs. Francine Sheffield, Mrs. Benita Applin, Mrs. Rolita Applin, Mr. Robert Ashley, and Miss Mary Bynes Applin. A host of nieces and nephews, his beloved children he reared as his own, and a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Dennis Armstrong, age 65, 118 Plantation Road, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Dennis Armstrong, age 65, will be held Monday, May 17th at 2 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Bishop Joel Ridley, pastor of the Body of Christ Ministry, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public walk-up viewing will be held today from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Annie Maria Grace Emery, age 63, of 12900 Highway 233 North, Rochelle, Georgia, died Tuesday, May 11th at her residence in Rochelle, Georgia. Survivors include a loving and devoted husband, Mr. Billy Emery of Rochelle, Georgia, her loving daughters, Mrs. Tasha L. Grace and Mrs. Damisha M. Miller, both of Rochelle, Georgia, Mrs. K. F. Johnson Smith and her husband, Sir Derek Smith, and Mrs. Rhonda L. Emery, all of Vero Beach, Florida. Her beloved son, Mr. Richard Emery Jr. of Rochelle, Georgia, Mr. Dexter E. Emery of Vero Beach, Florida. 22 beloved grandchildren, 27 great-grandchildren, a beloved brother, Mr. Victor A. Grace Sr., and his wife, Mrs. Felicia Grace of Abbeville, Georgia. Her loving sisters, Mrs. Eveline Cheese, Mrs. Sandra Grace, and her husband, Mr. Marcus Grace, Miss Ruby L. Grace, Miss Shanita L. Grace, Miss Shannon L. Lawson, and Miss Tammy L. Lawson, all of Rochelle, Georgia. Her beloved sisters-in-law, to include a special sister-in-law, Miss Norma J. Emery, Mrs. Barbara Adams and her husband, Mr. Glenn Adams, and Miss Dorothy Emery. Her brothers-in-law, Mr. Randy Emery and his wife, Mrs. Maddie Emery, and Mr. Eugene Emery. A host of aunts, uncles, special nieces and nephew, Miss LaPortia M. Emery and Mr. Victor A. Grace Jr., a host of cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Annie Maria Grace Emery, age 63, of 12900 Highway 233 North, Rochelle, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Annie Maria Grace Emery, age 63, will be held Tuesday, May 18th at 1 p.m. graveside at the Piney Grove Baptist Church Cemetery in Rochelle, Georgia. The pastor, the Reverend Travis Johnson, will officiate. The public walk-up viewing will be held Monday, May 17th from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mother Hattie May Mercer Jones, age 94, of 102 Foster Street, DeSoto, Georgia, died Wednesday, May 12, at the home of her beloved daughter and son-in-law, Mrs. Shirlene Williams, and her husband, Mr. Robert Williams of Leslie, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Miss Gladys Jones, Mr. Robert Jones, and Mr. Joseph Jones and his wife, Mrs. Patricia Jones, all of Americus, Georgia. Miss Carolyn Jones of DeSoto, Georgia, Mr. Willie Henry Jones of Americus, Georgia, Mr. Willie Frank Jones of DeSoto, Georgia, Mr. Moses Lee Jones of West Palm Beach, Florida, Mr. Otis Lee Jones of DeSoto, Georgia, Miss Gwendolyn Jones of Leslie, Georgia, and Mrs. Shirlene Williams and her husband, Mr. Robert Williams of Leslie, Georgia. 38 beloved grandchildren, a host of great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. Her sister-in-law, Mrs. Ozzie Wright of Cobb, Georgia, a beloved goddaughter, Mrs. Miranda Mitchell and her husband, Mr. Clete Mitchell, a host of nieces and nephews, to include Mr. Sammy Jane Mercer of Americus, Georgia, and a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mother Hattie May Mercer Jones, age 94, 102 Foster Street, DeSoto, Georgia. The funeral service for Mother Hattie May Mercer Jones, age 94, will be held Tuesday, May 18th at 5 p.m. at the New Zion Baptist Church Cemetery in Cobb, Georgia. The Reverend George F. Muntz, pastor of the Whole Truth International Ministry of Americus, Georgia, will officiate. The public walk-up viewing will be held Monday, May 17th from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Miss Dorothy Elaine Lofton, age 64, of 302 East 23rd Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, May 11th at Neverson Health in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include 11 and devoted children, Miss Patricia Allen and Mr. Kelvin Lofton, both of Cordele, Georgia. 4 beloved grandchildren, her loving and devoted mother, Pastor Ola B. Lofton of Arabi, Georgia. Her loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Martha Lofton Miller, Waycross, Georgia, and Tights Commissioner, Miss Deborah Lofton of Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Charlie Lofton Jr. of Arabi, Georgia, Mr. Wayne Lofton and Mr. Joe Lofton of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Herbert Lofton and Mr. Michael Lofton of Arabi, Georgia. Her beloved aunts, Mrs. Mildred May of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Mrs. Ella Mae Williams of Tampa, Florida, Mother Adeline Lofton of Arabi, Georgia, and Mrs. Leola Lofton of Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved great aunt, Mrs. Mattie Pearl Daniels of Cordele, Georgia, and Mrs. Barbara Lofton of Charlotte, North Carolina. A host of nieces and nephews, many cousins, to include a special cousin, Miss Wanda Simpson of Tampa, Florida. A host of other relatives and many sorrowing friends, to include a special friend, Miss Sandra Jones of Cordele, Georgia, survived. Miss Dorothy Elaine Lofton, age 64, 302 East 23rd Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Dorothy Elaine Lofton, age 64, will be held Wednesday, May 19th at 1 p.m. graveside at the Little Rock Baptist Church Cemetery in Arabi, Georgia. Elder James Butler will officiate. The public walk-up viewing will be Tuesday, May 18th from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. J.C. Chaney, age 82, of 505 East 1st Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, May 15, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his beloved children, Mr. Jerome Sebring of Lake Wales, Florida, Mr. T.J. Chaney, Mr. Larry Chaney, Mr. T.C. Chaney, Mr. Eddie Charles Chaney, Miss Geraldine Chaney, Miss Tina Chaney, and Mr. Jerry Chaney, all of West Palm Beach, Florida, Mr. Andrew Chaney of Cordele, Georgia, a host of other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. J.C. Chaney, age 82, of 505 East 1st Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. J.C. Chaney, age 82, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Millie Reese, age 80, of 1502 South 10th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, May 15th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Grace Reese of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Mr. Michael Reese and his wife, Mrs. Jennifer Reese of California, Miss Cynthia Reese of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Frederick Reese and his wife, Mrs. Yolanda Reese of Alabama, Mr. Reginald Reese and his wife, Miss Latoya Reese of South Carolina, and Mr. Ricardo Reese and his wife, Mrs. Tracy Reese of Warner Robins, Georgia. A host of beloved grandchildren and great-grandchildren. His loving sisters, Miss Nettie Whiteys, Miss Dorothy Patrick and her husband, Mr. Leonard Patrick, Miss Pearlie Whiteys, and Miss Sally Reese, all of Cordele, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. Arthur Lee Reese, and his wife, Mrs. Denise Reese of Cordele, Georgia. A host of nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Millie Reese, age 80, of 1502 South 10th Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Millie Reese, age 80, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
And now for our announcements. You're invited to worship with the New Poplar Spring Baptist Church today. Sunday morning worship service begins at 9:45 a.m. And you're invited to worship with them on Wednesday evenings at 6:45 p.m. via conference call by calling 253-993-3761. Pastor Johnny Dean and the members of New Poplar Spring welcome you to worship with them. You're invited to worship with the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church today. Their conference call schedule is as follows. Sunday morning worship service at 9 o'clock a.m. Tuesday midday prayer service at 12 o'clock noon. Thursday prayer meeting and Bible study is held at 6 o'clock p.m. The conference call number is 229-329-7611. Mother Lucille Shazer, Church Mother. Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Chairman of Deacons. Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. Everyone has a cordial invitation to pull up and praise with the Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church today during their morning worship service that begins at 10:30 a.m. Pastor Gregory Williams and the members welcome you to worship with them. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church extends you a cordial invitation to worship with them. Their conference call schedule is as follows. Sunday morning worship service at 10 o'clock a.m., prayer meeting at 12 o'clock noon, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Bible study is held at 5 o'clock p.m. on Wednesdays. The conference call number is 515-604-9765. The access code is 288180. Deacon Joe Wedges is the chairman of deacons. Dr. Dan James III is the pastor. You have a cordial invitation to worship with the Gethsemane Baptist Church today during their outdoor worship service that is held on the grounds of the church beginning at 10:30 a.m. Everyone is asked to wear a mask. Brother Cecil Strawber is the pastor. The annual Women's Day of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church will be observed today with our Church Without Walls beginning at 10:30 a.m. Sister Rosemary Jones will be the guest speaker. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend this outdoor worship service. Mother Evelyn Lewis is church mother. Deacon Leon Spears, chairman of deacons. Reverend Isaac H. Owens is the pastor. The Pleasant Valley Baptist Church of Pinehurst, Georgia, has extended a cordial invitation for you to worship with them today during their anniversary service beginning at 10:30 a.m. This will be a drive-up service, and if you would like, you can give a donation for the Candlelight Memorial Service for your loved ones. Deacon Royce Bolden is the chairman of deacons. Dr. Beverly M. Bolden is the pastor. The Spring Hill Baptist Church extends a cordial invitation for you to worship with them today, beginning at 11 o'clock a.m. Everyone is invited to attend, and the Spring Hill Worship Service will be a drive-up and worship with them each first and third Sunday. Sister Mary Ann Lewis is the secretary. Deacon Sam Anderson is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Choice Cobb Sr. is the pastor. We'd also like to remind you that the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church will have drive-up and worship in their one-night revival, which will be held on Thursday, May 20th at 6 o'clock p.m. Reverend Donnie R. Hall Sr. will be the guest revivalist. Again, Mother Lucille Shays, the church mother. Deacon Arthur L. Parker, chairman of deacons. Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. You're invited to attend the regular monthly meeting of the local chapter of the NAACP this afternoon at 4 o'clock p.m. at Blackshear Place. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Dr. Ruby Jackson is the branch secretary. Reverend Isaac H. Owens is branch president.
It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mrs. Carrie Amelia Jackson Brown, age 72, of 1007 Thomas Mill Road, Plains, Georgia, died Saturday, May 8th at her residence. The funeral service for Mrs. Carrie Amelia Jackson Brown, age 72, will be held today, Sunday, May 16, 1 p.m., graveside at the Lebanon Cemetery in Plains, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Glenn Bryant Sr., pastor of the New Lebanon Baptist Church, will officiate. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Willie James Brown, age 74, of 401 East 16th Street, Tifton, Georgia, died Saturday, May 8th, at the Tiff Regional Medical Center in Tifton, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors for United States Navy veteran Mr. Willie James Brown, age 74, will be held today, Sunday, May 16, at 5 p.m., graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. Mr. Dennis Armstrong, age 65, of 118 Plantation Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, May 10th, at his residence. The funeral service for Mr. Dennis Armstrong will be held Monday, May 17th, at 2 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Bishop Joel Ridley, pastor of the Body of Christ Ministry, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public walk-up viewing will be held today from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Annie Maria Grace Emery, age 63, of 12900 Highway 233, North Rochelle, Georgia, died Tuesday, May 11th, at her residence in Rochelle, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Annie Maria Grace Emery, age 63, will be held Tuesday, May 18 at 1 p.m. at the Piney Grove Baptist Church Cemetery in Rochelle, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Travis Johnson, will officiate. The public walk-up viewing and visitation will be Monday, May 17 from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mother Hattie May Mercer Jones, age 94, 102 Foster Street, DeSoto, Georgia, died Wednesday, May 12th at the home of her daughter and son-in-law, Mrs. Shirlene Williams, in Leslie, Georgia. The funeral service for Mother Hattie May Mercer Jones, age 94, will be held Tuesday, May 18 at 5 p.m. graveside at the New Zion Baptist Church Cemetery in Cobb, Georgia. The Reverend George F. Muntz, pastor of the Whole Truth International Ministry, will officiate. The public walk-up viewing will be held Monday, May 17, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Miss Dorothy Elaine Lofton, age 64, of 302 East 23rd Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, May 11th at Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Dorothy Elaine Lofton, age 64, will be held Wednesday, May 19th at 1 p.m. graveside at the Little Rock Baptist Church Cemetery in Araby, Georgia. Elder James Butler will officiate. The public walk-up viewing will be Tuesday, May 18, from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. J.C. Chaney, age 82, of 505 East 1st Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, May 15, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. J.C. Chaney, age 82, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Millet Reese, age 80, of 1502 South 10th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, May 15, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Millet Reese, age 80, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams funeral directors serving Cordele and Diana are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, our program this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of Mother Jessie Alma Ezel of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Miss Bertha LaShawn Tyner Holt of Americus, Georgia. The family of Miss Tanya Latrice Sanders of Montezuma, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Geneva Green Lusain of Leslie, Georgia. The family of Mr. Hiram Ford of Cordele, Georgia. Our program is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Mrs. Carrie Amelia Jackson Brown of Plains, Georgia. The family of United States Navy veteran Mr. Willie James Brown of Tifton, Georgia. The family of Mr. Dennis Armstrong of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Annie Maria Grace Emery of Abbeville, Georgia. The family of Mother Hattie May Mercer Jones of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of Miss Dorothy Elaine Lofton of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. J.C. Chaney of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Millet Reese of Cordele, Georgia. Our program is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in our armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker. This selection goes out to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker, who received his first Pfizer vaccine at Dr. White's institution on this past Thursday there. We have video that will bring that to you at a later date. Jai received his first vaccination shot on this past Thursday at the age of 14. This selection goes out to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Billy Ann Hall, to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter. Goes out to my sister, Mrs. Maddie Mae Johnson, better known as Sister Girl, and Mrs. Patsy Jackson and her husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. This selection goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, Jr., program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, to our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, and his wife, Mrs. Kathy Williams, and family. Goes out to the mother of the church, Mother Lucille Shazer, age 108. Yes, age 108. Goes out especially to our own Dr. Frankie Harmon of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, who officially graduated on yesterday with a doctorate degree in theology. Dr. Frankie Harmon of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home and pastor of the New St. Stephen's Church here in Cordele, Georgia. Our program goes out to Mother Theron Jones and family, and the entire Jones and Tarbert family, Mother Dorothy Tarbert and family, Mrs. Juanita and Mr. John Tarbert and family, Mother Grace Patrick and family, Mother Easter Byram and family, Miss Willie Mae Crapp and family. Goes out to Deaconess Rosemary Robinson Jones, who will be the guest speaker this morning at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church in observance of their Women's Day on today. Goes out to her parents, Deacon and Mrs. Arthur Robinson and family. Goes out to Miss Easter May Sanders and family, and to each and everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. Again, it's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. And again, we do encourage each and everyone to obtain your vaccine as soon as possible. And Dr. White is offering the vaccine at the M.D. White's Institute here in Cordele, Georgia. And again, Jai received his vaccine on Thursday and been doing fine there. God bless you and keep you is our prayer.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. In your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
Some of these days.